The Salem Witch Trials by Sidney Donovan. The year 1692. In Salem Village, Massachusetts, strange events began to occur. Young girls with their extreme fits, which included seizing, cursing, screaming, or just sitting and staring off into space. With no real explanation, the village began to blame the actions of the young girls on witchcraft. Salem Village was first settled in 1626, and its population was made up of Puritans, a religious group of English people whose goal was to purify the church from within. Puritans wanted to migrate to America to avoid religious judgment from people in England. From 1630 to 1641, 20,000 Puritans migrated throughout the northeast of America. They migrated in hopes of creating a city on the hill like town. Puritans were extremely religious and had big families. These families strictly followed gender roles, which meant men were hunting and spending most of their time outside while women stayed in and cooked and cleaned. Puritans' religious beliefs included the belief everyone was born sinful, but there was a group called the elect who were born with God's gift of grace. The gift of grace was the only way for Puritans to get into heaven, but there wasn't a way for anyone to know who was born with this gift. People were assumed to be born with God's grace if they were active members of the church. Witchcraft, which was very against Puritan beliefs, made the Salem witch trials extremely devastating. Betty Paris and Abigail Williams were the first two girls to show signs of illness in January of 1692. Betty's father, Reverend Samuel Paris, was the preacher at the village church. Abigail Williams was Reverend Paris's niece who lived with his family. Soon after the two girls became sick, other girls began to display the same symptoms. Doctors of the village were dumbfounded, which led them to determine the case was witchcraft. Reverend Paris began to preach sermons to the village condemning the devil and anyone who participated in his work. Eventually, some older girls in the village began displaying these same symptoms. These girls included Ann Putnam, Mercy Lewis, Elizabeth Hubbard, and Mary Walcott. Since these girls were older, they were allowed to testify in court, but none of them would step up and say who cursed them. Many people made any attempt they could to have the witches revealed, including making witch cake made of the cursed girls' urine and rye meal. Every attempt caused the girls to act out more and more. The village pressured the girls into revealing the witches' identities, and then the first three were named: Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. Tituba was a slave in the Paris household. Sarah Good was a poor beggar, and Sarah Osborne was a feisty widow. All three of these women were considered outcasts of the village, so they had no one to defend them during these trials. The three women were arrested in an attempt to put a stop to the girls' strange behavior. Sarah Good and Osborne both denied being involved in witchcraft, but Tituba claimed the devil told her to hurt the young girls. Not only did she admit to participating in witchcraft, but she said there were multiple other people involved. Tituba's claims led the village to erupt in fear even more. Tituba was interviewed 3 times by John Hathorne, where she told him the devil revealed a book of all the witches in the village. She said both Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne's names were written within the book, but there was also many more. She continued with her interview, saying small animals were also part of the devil. One of these animals was a small yellow bird she said was associated with Sarah Osborne, and she witnessed Sarah feeding this bird. This claim by Tituba led to the arrest of many other people. The cursed girls and villagers of Salem began to accuse anyone of witchcraft. Almost 150 villagers were identified as witches and arrested. 19 of these accused witches were found guilty and hung. The targeted group of accused witches tended to be older women who weren't well liked or had some type of scandal surrounding them. Suspicion of the girls rose when well-respected religious women were accused of witchcraft. When the village craze began to settle, many villagers believed they made a mistake because the young girls began to accuse people who were definitely not witches. Many people wonder, why did all this happen? The girls were not cursed, so what made them act out? The young girls went into the woods and experimented with fortune-telling and spells for fun. They participated in spells to see their future husbands and to see what their lives would be like in the future. These spells and the village-wide fear of witchcraft intimidated the girls, which is why they began to act strange. This pictures an image from the movie The Crucible, which is based off the Salem witch trials. After being told their sickness was from witchcraft, the girls began to embrace the idea of being possessed. The girls gained attention from doctors in the town because of their wild behavior. Young girls in the 1600s received no attention because women were considered inferior to men. So for a young girl to be the center of attention, it was a big deal. The girls began to act more and more violently, and more girls joined in. The trials continued for so long because having attention was fun to them. They received so much attention that adult men began to act like they had these symptoms as well to gain back the attention from the village. Despite displaying these symptoms, men were not given the level of attention the girls received. Although we know today that no one was cursed by witchcraft, people in the village truly believed they were. Villagers claimed that even animals began to act strange and reported cows would race around fields and then fall to the ground while twitching. The village was so terrified that they wanted to kill off the accused witches as soon as possible so everything would go back to normal. The witch trials are significant to us today because of how fast things got out of hand. The trials give us an example of a poorly run government and how fear and rumors can cause corruption. The lives of many villagers were completely ruined due to a lack of structure in government. The story of Salem can also relate to our society today in some ways. Similarly to the trials, many people are discriminated against for their status, wealth, and race. People are often accused of crimes because they fit the description, although they didn't do anything wrong. We should take the lesson learned from the Salem witch trials and apply it to society today. Someone may fit a certain stereotype, but that doesn't mean they should be accused of something they didn't do.